Good day, everyone. How are you? I hope all of you are doing fine. Let me first introduce myself. I am Marjorie L. Pantoja, a Bachelor of Secondary Education major in Social Studies, second year student. And now I am about to discuss our chosen topic, which is Chapter 13, The Great War, together with my partner, Miss Monica Marquez. So before we proceed to the main events in this chapter, let me first read what are the learning objectives. So after the discussion, the students should be able to first describe how nationalism, imperialism, militarism, and national rivalries push Europe toward war. Second, explain how the assassination in Sarajevo led to the start of World War One. Then, analyze the causes and effects of the European alliance systems. Fourth, observe how a collective security system like the League of Nations works and the Treaty of Versailles' effect on Germany. Then lastly, identify the changes in those facts made war more likely according to each perspective. Now, Part 1, Marching Toward War. In Marching Toward War, the case is, by the turn of 20th century, the nations of Europe had been largely at peace with one another for nearly 30 years. They achieved a permanent peace and gained momentum since the middle of 19th century. At the beginning of 1900s, peace and harmony were present, and hundreds of peace organizations were active. Beyond the surface of peace and harmony, and of course goodwill, Europe witnessed several gradual developments, not knowing that those developments would ultimately help propel the continent into war. So what happened? In Europe, military build up nationalistic feelings, and rival alliances set the stage for a continental war. So here are the reasons that help set the stage for war. First is the nationalism. Nationalism is the deep devotion to one's nation. They say that nationalism could be a unifying force and a disunifying force at the same time. So how? Nationalism could be a unifying force when the people being united are similar in culture, religion, race, language, and others. It brings common people together, forming a bigger group. The next is nationalism could be a disunifying force when people who aren't similar are united under a single nation. So, because of being devoted, nagkaroon ng palakasan in every corner. So, we have the competition for materials and markets. Throughout most of the 20th century, there were sharp differences in European agricultural organization. So in this way, mas naging innovative sila and at the same time naging competitive. But then although they have their own ways dealing with agriculture aspect, they still have the same products or goods. For example, corn grown and was an important crop in the southwestern Russia also appears in France and Italy. Rice in northern Italy and citrus fruits in Spain. Grain cultivation in Great Britain. Viticulture is important in Germany. Domestic production of wool, hides, and leather is also insufficient. So as sources, raw materials and new markets exhibited on growing interest in colonies. The other is territorial disputes. So in these territorial disputes, France had never gotten over the loss of Alsace-Lorraine to Germany. And then Austria-Hungary and Russia both tried to dominate in the Balkans. So this competition for materials and markets resulted to fierce rivalry. And because of the two, rivalry was developed and increased among the great powers of Europe. So, what nations are included in this great power of Europe? So, we have the Austria-Hungary, Germany, Great Britain, Russia, Italy, and France. And all of these were considered as great powers because they represent the most important powers on nations in Europe. So another force that helped set the stage, the war in Europe, was the imperialism. So imperialism is the policy in which a strong nation seeks to dominate other countries politically, economically, or socially. With this, European nations completed for colonies in Asia and Africa, which pushed them to continue compete for overseas empires, and then mistrust and rivalry of one another depend. Yet another troubling development was the rise of a dangerous European arms race. This is militarism. It is a policy of glorifying military power and keeping an army prepared for war. So, European nations believed that to be truly great, they needed to have a powerful military. That was according to militarism. So by 1914, all the great powers except Britain had large standing armies. Importance of being able to quickly mobilize, organize, and move troops. Having a large and strong standing army made citizens feel patriotic. Now, international rivalries led to the creation of several military alliances among the great powers as early as 1870s. So this alliance system had been designed to keep peace in Europe but instead pushed the continent into war. Then, that is the time when Bismarck came. So who is Otto von Bismarck? Otto von Bismarck is the blood and iron chancellor of Prussia, who used war to unify Germany. So he did everything to maintain the peace in Germany. And then after 1871, he declared Germany to be a satisfied power. Also, he saw France as the greatest threat to peace, as France is still wanted to revenge for its defeat in the Franco-Prussian War. So, ano nga ba ang nangyari sa Franco-Prussian War? Bakit gustong-gusto ng France na makapaghiganti? So, Franco-Prussian War is also called the Franco-German War that happened in 1870 to 1871. So, this is the war in which a coalition of German states led by Prussia defeated France. The immediate cause of this war was the candidacy of Prince Leopold for the Spanish throne, which raised the possibility of a combination of Prussia and Spain against France. So following diplomatic maneuvers to block Leopold's candidacy, the Prussian Chancellor Bismarck published the Ems telegram. So this Ems telegram provoked the French government into declaring war. And then other German states sided with Prussia and German troops under General Moltke, who scored repeated victories. So, sino ito si General Moltke? So, he is known as the superior in numbers and organizations, which is nakatulong para makascore ng para manalo ng maraming beses ang Prussia. And then, after that, later on, a harsh peace treaty was implemented. So Germany annexed Alsace and half of Lorraine. France was occupied until a large indemnity was paid. So ang nangyari, nagkaroon ng agreement to settle land disputes. And what happened was Germany took over the Alsace and half of Lorraine, while France was occupied until they paid a particular amount for its compensation. So, therefore, Bismarck's goal was to isolate France. Kasi nga gusto makaganti ng France. And then Bismarck stressed, as long as it is without allies, France poses no danger to us. So, ang sabi ni Bismarck, hanggat wala daw kakampi ang France, hindi daw sila dapat matakot dito. So, ang ginawa naman niya noong 1879, he formed the dual alliance between Germany and Austria-Hungary. So, yun. Para hindi daw makaganti ang France, gumawa siya ng dual alliance. And then after 2 years, Italy joined naman, forming the Triple Alliance. So, yun ang bumuo. Nung una, ang nangyari, Germany muna, and then Austria-Hungary yung nagkaroon ng alliance. And then, Italy, sumunod naman ng Italy na nag-form sila ng Triple Alliance. So, yun yung naging foundation ni Bismarck para maging kampante siya na hindi makakaganti ang France. And then, hindi lang yon. In 1881, he made a treaty with Russia. So, ang ginawa niya para hindi makuha ng France ang Russia, siya na mismo yung gumawa ng paraan para magkaroon ng agreement sa Russia, which is pumayag naman. Then, but there it goes, shifting alliances threatened peace. So what happened after the Russia agreed to the agreement with the Germany? In 1890, Germany's foreign policy changed dramatically. So nagbago daw. And then popular Bismarck was forced to resign by Wilhelm II. So, who is Wilhelm II? Kaiser Wilhelm II is a very, very proud and stubborn man who became the next ruler of Germany after Bismarck. So Kaiser did not wish to share power with anyone and was eager to show the world just how mighty Germany had become. So ayaw niyang mag-share ng power sa kahit na kaninong nation, and gusto niyang ipagmayabang kung ano na ang narating ng Germany. Ano na ang Germany nung panahon na yon. And then he also stressed this phrase, I and the army were born for one another. So nandiyan naman daw ang army para tulungan siya. So mas naging competitive siya, and at the same time naging mayabang siya. And then dahil sa pag-uugali ni Wilhelm II na yun, it made their treaty with Russia lapse in 1890. So, kumawala na ang Russia sa kanila. Nawala na ang agreement nilang dalawa. And then what happened was, nag-respond ang Russia sa pamamagitan ng forming a defensive military alliance with France in 1892. So dahil alam ng Russia na ang France ay gustong makaganti sa Prussia or Germany, kinuha niya ang France. Nagkaroon siya ng treaty dito noong 1892. Kasi nga, 'di ba? Nagalit or nagkaroon ng hinanakit ang Russia sa France that time. Nagkaroon ng hinanakit ang Russia sa Germany that time. So, kinuha naman ni Russia si France. And then, dahil doon sa ginawa ng Russia, ano naman kaya ang naging action ni Wilhelm II? Yan. He began a tremendous shipbuilding program to make the German Navy equal to the British fleet. So, yon. Gumawa siya ng shipbuilding program para daw yung German Navy is equal sa British fleet, which is the Great Britain. But out of curiosity naman ng Germany, alarma ang Great Britain. So, sa pagiging alarma ng Great Britain, in 1907, the Great Britain formed an entente with France. So, yun naman. So, parang si France that time is parang comfortable kasi in the midst of paghahanap ng paraan or ng tamang panahon para makaganti sa Prussia. Parang mismong yung panahon na ang nagbibigay sa kanya ng chance na yon. And then, 'di ba, si Russia nagkaroon ng agreement kay France. And then ngayon naman sumunod si Great Britain. So magkaiba, hindi sila tatlo sa isang alyansa. Magkaiba sila. Nauna lamang ang Russia sa France and then sumunod ang Great Britain sa France. But then later on, Great Britain made an entente also with Russia. So, si Great Britain naman, nakipag-agreement din kay Russia, which is connected kay France. That is why nabuo nila yung Triple Entente. So, Triple Entente, ang bumubuo sa kanila is Great Britain, France, and Russia. So, ano kaya ang mararamdaman ng Germany ngayon na nabalitaan na niya or nasagap na niya na ang France ay meron ng kamiyembro, meron ng kakampi. And then, ano kayang mangyayari? Ang France kaya ay makakapaghiganti sa Prussia? Or matatalo ulit sila? Yan. So, by 1907, in Europe, two rival camps existed. So, ayun na nga, two rival camps, the two alliance system. So, we have the Triple Entente, which included the Great Britain, France, and Russia. And then the other one is Triple Alliance, included Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy. So, you can see in the map kung ano yung mga nasakop nila during that time. So, kapag green, that is for Triple Entente. And then kapag reddish is for Triple Alliance. So, yan. Makikita nyo dyan. So, syempre, competitive sila. Kanya-kanya sila ng pananakop. Or, let's just say, kanya-kanya sila ng paghahanap ng paraan upang mas mapapatunayan nila na karapat dapat sila doon. Na sila yung, di ba, they are members of great power. So, as they are considered as great power of Europe, so naglalabanan sila mismo. They are the Triple Entente and Triple Alliance. So, and then, after that, a dispute between two rival powers occurred. Next is the crisis in the Balkans. So what happened here? So out of nowhere, that dispute more likely to occur than on the Balkan Peninsula. So Balkan Peninsula is the mountainous peninsula in the southeastern corner of Europe. It is the home to an assortment of ethnic groups. It is also known as the power keg of Europe. So, why does Balkan Peninsula is considered as the power keg of Europe? It is because the long history of nationalist uprisings and ethnic clashes. Yan. So, in this crisis in the Balkans, the Ottoman Empire and the Balkan region were in turmoil. Balkan nations were struggling to break away from the Ottoman Empire. So, this is all about the Ottoman Empire and the Balkan region. So, meron silang hindi pagkakaunawaan. And then because of this, nagkaroon ng First and Second Balkan Wars. First Balkan War was the fought between the members of the Balkan League. So the members of Balkan League was the Serbia, Bulgaria, Greece, Montenegro, and to be added was the Romania. And then it was the fought between the Balkan League and the Ottoman Empire. Next is the Second Balkan War. It began when Serbia, Greece, and Romania quarreled with Bulgaria over the division of their joint conquest in Macedonia. So, yan. You could see in the picture, there are Balkan troops. Sila yung mga nakipaglaban during that time. And then, what are the results of these Balkan wars? First was Greece gained southern Macedonia as well as the island of Crete. Second, Serbia gained the Kosovo region and extended into northern and central Macedonia. Then Albania was made an independent state under a German prince. And most importantly, ang pinaka-highlighted sa results ng Balkan Wars na ito was the growth of tension between Austria-Hungary and Serbia. So what happened? Then, before that, let us consider why the Ottoman Empire fell. Ottoman Empire was once among the biggest military and economic powers in the world, diba? So what happened? First, they say that it was too agrarian. Bakit kaya? Napaka-agrarian daw. Ano ang epekto? Bakit sila natalo? Bakit ang Ottoman Empire ay nag-fell? It is because remained dependent upon farming. So, dun sila mas nag-focus. And then, lacked the factories and mills. So, as a result, economic growth became weak, then generated agricultural surplus went to pay loans. So, lahat ng kinita nila sa agriculture ay pinambayad nila sa kanilang mga utang. And then, they didn't have the industrial might to produce heavy weaponry during the World War I. Munitions and iron ore steel needed to build railroads to support the war effort. So, wala silang mapagkunan kasi nga, pinambayad nila sa kanilang mga utang during the World War I. Wala silang napagkunan na pwedeng gamitin para sa kanilang mga armas. Second, it wasn't cohesive enough. It wasn't cohesive enough because various people who were part of the empire grew more and more rebellious. After losing the wars to a coalition in 1912, which included some of its former imperial possessions, the empire was forced to give up its remaining European territory. Then, its population was undereducated. Undereducated daw ang mga tao dito. So, despite of the efforts to improve education. The empire had a shortage of well-trained military officers, engineers, clerks, doctors, and other professions. Next, other countries deliberately weakened it. So who are the countries that deliberately weakened the Ottoman Empire? Russia and Austria both supported rebellious nationalists in the Balkans to further their own influence. Then British and French carved away the territory controlled by the Ottoman Empire in the Middle East and North Africa. So, ang mga nakasagupa ng Ottoman Empire that time was the Russia, Austria, Britain, and the France. So, yun ang nagpahina sa kanila. Another, face a destructive rivalry with Russia. So, Russia daw yung pinakamalakihang epekto sa Ottoman Empire. Why kaya? Because the Russian Empire was the single greatest threat to the Ottoman Empire, and it was a truly existential threat, as Russia resisted the idea of negotiating a separate power with the empire. So, yon. And then last reason why Ottoman Empire fell was they picked the wrong side in World War I. So, kanino siya kumumpi? Kaninong side? Saang country? So, before World War I, Ottoman Empire had signed a secret treaty with Germany. So, sa Germany pala. Pero, ang pagkakaroon nila ng secret treaty na ito ay turned out to be a very bad choice. Bad choice daw yun. Bakit? Ano kaya ang nangyari? Bakit bad choice yun para sa kanila? It was because armies fought brutal, bloody campaign to protect Constantinople from invading Allied forces, which ultimately lost 500,000 soldiers. And those million soldiers na namatay was because of the disease, and plus about 3.8 million more who were injured or became ill. So those are the reasons why the Ottoman Empire fell. Some Balkan groups struggled to force themselves from the Ottoman Turks, while others already had succeeded in breaking away from their Turkish rulers. So each group longed to extend its borders. Here they are. Serbia had a large Slavic population, hoped to absorb all the Slavs on the Balkan Peninsula. So Serbia has the large Slavic population. And what makes someone Slavic? Slavs are those ethnic group of people who share a long-term cultural continuity and who speak a set of related languages. So they are the long-term cultural continuity. So sila ay ang mga Slavic population ay mga ethnic group. Then next, aside from Serbia was the Russia. It is the Slavic nation who supported Serbian nationalism. So, Serbia became allies with Russia, then enemies of Austria. And other side, Austria took over Bosnia and Herzegovina in 1908. So years after, poisoned atmosphere of mutual dislike and mistrust between Serbia and Austria deepened. So, with this, as there was poisoned atmosphere of mutual dislike and mistrust, a well-known person stepped in. And this is Archduke Franz Ferdinand. So, Archduke Franz Ferdinand is the heir of the Austro-Hungarian throne. He is connected to these happenings because on June 28, 1914, he paid a state visit to Sarajevo, the capital of Bosnia, together with his wife Sophie. So ignoring the fact that several would-be assassins awaited along the road, at 10 a.m., one of the attackers, Nedelko Kabrinovic, threw a grenade at the royal couple's car. The grenade bumped off at the back of the car, and then ang natamaan is yung mga kasamahan nila dun sa huling part ng car na yon. And then, of course, the royal couple was shocked. And then, after completing the planned reception at City Hall, they changed their mind and their schedules. So, they came to the place where yung mga nasugatan is nandoon. But then, along their way toward the street, nagkaroon ng chance si Gavrilo Princip na barilin si Archduke Franz Ferdinand with his wife using the Browning pistol. So who is Gavrilo Princip? Gavrilo Princip is a 19-year-old radical Serbian working against Austrian rule as a member of Black Hand. What is this Black Hand? Black Hand is a secret society in which this aimed and also committed to do unbearable thing against Austrian, as to say that Austria took over the areas with large Slavic populations that would be for the Serbians only. The driver of the couple insisted a medical help to help the royal couple, but then it was too late. And you know what? The researchers said that the last words of Archduke Franz Ferdinand is this: Sophie, Sophie, don't lie. Live for our children. So that was the last words of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. So Archduke Franz Ferdinand and his wife died immediately. Meanwhile, Gavrilo Princip tried to shoot himself, but he was arrested gradually by the armies and also kasama yung mga kasabwat niya dito. He was about to be punished by death penalty, but he was too young that time. So he was sentenced 20 years in prison and then died because of tuberculosis in year 1914. And then because the assassin was a Serbian, which is Gavrilo Princip, Austria decided to use the murders as an excuse to punish Serbia. That is why on July 23, Austria presented Serbia with an ultimatum containing numerous demands. So what is this ultimatum? Ultimatum is a list of demands that if not met, this will lead to serious consequences. And then Serbia knew that refusing the ultimatum would lead to war against the more powerful Austria. Therefore, Serbian leaders agreed to most of Austria's demands. However, Austria do not have the intention to negotiate with it. That is why on July 28, Austria rejected Serbia's offer and declared war. Then Germany supported Austria. And the same day, Russia mobilized troops toward Austria. The turning point here is that the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand was mainly the cause of World War I. Well, all the leaders of Europe suddenly noticed all about it, but then it was too late. The war had been already set in motion. Moving on to the second part of this chapter. So in this part 2, Europe plunges into war rather. The Great War begins. As a result, nearly all Europe soon joined what would be the largest, most destructive war the world had yet seen. So, after Austria's declaration of war, Russia began moving its troops toward Austria and Germany. So, in August 1, 1914, Germany declared war on Russia. And then after 2 days, August 3, 1914, Germany declared war on France. So in response, Great Britain declared war on Germany. So yun na, nag-start na ang war. The Great War begins. So in this case, Germany and Austria made up the Central Powers. And then the Ottoman Empire and Bulgaria joined the Central Powers. So, ang nawala dito sa miyembro ng Germany and Austria was Italy. So, anong nangyari sa Italy? Bakit hindi na siya kasama ng Germany and Austria? As to consider that they are the members of Triple Alliance. So, in the other hand, Great Britain, France, and Russia were known as the Allied Powers or Allies. Japan and Italy also joined the Allies. So, yun ang nangyari. Ang Italy naman ay sumanib sa Great Britain, France, and Russia, which are included in the Triple Entente. So, you can see on the map here, the Russian Empire, Great Britain, Germany, France, Austria-Hungary, and of course the Italy. So World War I, we have the Allied Powers and Central Powers. Allied Powers included are the Great Britain, France, Russia, Japan on 1914, Italy on 1915, and USA on year 1917. On the other hand is the Central Powers, included the Germany, Austria-Hungary, Turkey on 1914, and Bulgaria on year 1915. So millions of soldiers happily marched to this battle in the late summer of year 1914, and one of them was Sir Edward Grey. Sir Edward Grey is a Britain's foreign minister. He sadly said to a friend, "The lamps are going out all over Europe. We shall not see them lit again in our lifetime." So according to Sir Edward Grey, ayaw na ulit niyang maranasan kung ano yung naranasan niya toward that march on that battle on the summer of 1914. So makikita ninyo dito kung paano ang lines and gaano karami ang mga nag-march during the battle on 1914. Next, a bloody stalemate. So along the French border, the war turned into a long and bloody stalemate or deadlock. This region in northern France became known as the Western Front. So Western Front is the region in northern France. So nagkaroon ng deadlock. Sa France lang ang region na yun. In the case of Germany, they made a Schlieffen Plan. So what is this Schlieffen Plan? It is a battle strategy developed by Germany, as I am saying. It was named after its designer, General Alfred Graf von Schlieffen. Here is the picture of him. This Schlieffen Plan is a military plan to attack France first before Russia, since Russia was lack of technology. So this plan aims to attack France first. So what could be happened during this time? Nangyari nga ba ang gusto ng Germany na makalaban or matalo ang France, and then masusunod kaya nila ang Russia? Let us find out. We have the Battle of the Marne. Germany quickly swept through France and reached the outskirts of Paris and Wien. So as early as September 5, 1914, a major battle outside of Paris in the valley of the Marne River. That is why it was called Battle of the Marne, because it happened outside the Paris in the valley of the Marne River. This battle lasted 4 days of fighting. Of course, Germans retreated away from Paris. This Battle of the Marne was considered to be the first major battle in the Western Front and possibly the most important event of the war. So because of this Battle of the Marne, it is all about the fight between Germany and France. And what happened was the Germany defeated by the France. The reason why the Schlieffen Plan was ruined or destroyed, and the Russians were invading Germany from the east. So let us have now the war in the trenches. Opposing armies on the Western Front had dug miles of parallel trenches to protect themselves from enemy fire. So in this war in the trenches, Germany is responsible in this war. Trench warfare, soldiers fought each other from trenches. Armies traded huge losses for pitifully small land gains. So the reason why there was a war in the trenches during that time was because Germany want to gain again the land that supposed to be for them, for a reason that France defeated Germany, as I am saying. But you know what? The life in trenches was miserable that time. Why? Because soldiers slept in mud. Trenches swarmed with rats. Fresh food was non-existent, and it was really impossible to sleep. So, ikaw ba naman ang matutulog sa ganoong kalagayan na nilalanguyan ng mga rats ang trenches? And then, may mga putik, hindi maganda ang mga pagkain. So, hindi ka talaga makakatulog. And, you can see in the picture kung paano nila ito isinasagawa. Kung gaano ang hirap na naramdaman nila during that time para lang mabawi yung land na dapat ay para sa kanila. So, the space between the trenches was called no man's land. To be highlighted here, life in the trenches is like living in hell. Now, the new weapons of war. So military strategies were at a loss due to the new technology that made the war move faster and cause many more casualties. So we have the poison gas. Poison gas cause blinding or severe blisters, while others' death cause was by choking. So here is the picture. The first picture. Next is the machine gun. Fired ammunition automatically and was used widely in combat. This made difficult for forces to advance. So this machine gun was very heavy. Just to consider during that time that they were also industrialized, and industrialized time was just nag-start pa lang. So of course mabibigat yung mga materials na ginamit sa machine gun na ito, and actually this was used before as inilalagay sa lupa, and then gagamitin nila para sa kanilang mga kaaway. So kailangan maraming tao mag-ooperate ng machine gun na ito. Third, the armored tanks. Yan. move on chain tracks, and could cross many types of terrain. So dahil sa sobrang laki ng armored tanks, it could cross many types of terrain. Then last is the submarines. The German submarines known as U-boats. I think this was called U-boats because the shape of this submarine is like the letter of U. So those are the new weapons of war. We have this laughter in its peak in year 1916. So what happened? On the month of February, Germans launched a massive attack against the French near Verdun. It lost more than 30,000 men. And then on the month of July, British forces attacked the Germans northwest of Verdun in the valley of the Somme River. In the first day of the battle, more than 20,000 British soldiers were killed. And then in the month of November, finally the Battle of the Somme ended. But you know what? Each side suffered more than 500,000 casualties. So if there is Western Front, of course, there should be Eastern Front. So what is this Eastern Front? Eastern Front stretched along the German and Russian border. To be highlighted, battle on the Eastern Front. So you can see in the map here the Eastern Front, which is stretched from German and Russian border. So Russians and Serbs battled first with Germans, then defeated Austrians twice. During the 4-day battle, the German crushed the invading Russian, in which more than 30,000 Russian soldiers were killed. As to revenge, Russian forces defeated the Austrians twice in September year 1914. And on December, Austrians managed to turn the tide, then defeated the Russians. That was the time when Russia was in a struggle. Now, by 1916, Russia's war effort was near collapse. Why? Reasons were because they are not industrialized like the West. Short on food, guns, ammunition, and clothes, Germans had a blockade that prevented allies from helping Russia. So of course, natalo ang Russia, or nag-struggle ang Russia at that time because hindi na sila ganon ka-industrialized like the West. And as to consider, they were short on foods, guns, ammunitions, and clothes. So, hindi na nila nakayanan yung ganoong paghihirap. Ikaw ba naman ang walang kain, walang weapons para makalaban, and wala ka man lang clothes? Also, Germans had a blockade that prevented allies from helping Russia. So, gumawa ang Germany ng harang sa border ng Russia in order for the allies not to help the Russia sa pag-struggle nito. And those nations that are member of allied powers are the Great Britain, France, and Italy. So, hindi siya nagawang matulungan ng mga ito during the Russia's struggle. So, the part 3, which is a global conflict, and the last part, a flood peace, will be reported or discussed by my partner, which is Miss Monica Marquez. So, you better click and listen to the next video. Continue to learn about the Great War. So, thank you very much for listening from my discussion I hope you learned a lot about the Great War from the part 1 and until the part 2. Stay tuned!